Welcome to A Slice of Life. Tonight we're going to be revisiting the subject of the Saltmarsh sparrow seen here in this photo. We have with us a grad student called Franco Gigliotti, and he's going to tell us what he's been doing with the Saltmarsh sparrow. Franco Gigliotti, welcome to A Slice of Life.
Thank you, Jim. Really appreciate you having me on.
I'm so excited to have you on because you're an actual researcher on the Saltmarsh sparrow.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's have a little verbal resume about how you got from, I guess, college or high school to where you are today at UConn.
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in the Philadelphia area and had an interest in wildlife and conservation ever since I was a kid. I went to do my undergraduate degree at North Carolina State University, where I majored in conservation biology, and spent a couple years after I graduated working for a variety of graduate students and other researchers on research projects mostly centered around birds. And after that, I did a master's degree at University of Alabama, where I studied red-cockaded woodpeckers, which are a threatened species that breed in longleaf pine ecosystems down south. And after that, I got interested in salt marshes. I came up to UConn to study salt marsh birds, and that's where I've been for the last 5 years or so.
Wow. The salt marsh is a very busy environment, I would think. A lot of food production there.
Definitely, yeah. Salt marshes are one of the more productive ecosystems globally. They're also one of the most threatened. So, you know, there's a challenge there where we have such a productive system, creates a lot of food for very specialized organisms that can use the salt marsh, but then also this is a ecosystem that is threatened by a variety of different threats and unfortunately is on the downswing extent-wise globally.
Wow. Let's talk about the Saltmarsh sparrow.
Sure.
Did you decide to do the Saltmarsh sparrow, or were you assigned it by your supervisor at UConn?
So when I was reaching out to, my graduate advisor at UConn is Chris Elphick. He's a researcher. He's been working on Saltmarsh sparrow research and related saltmarsh bird research in the state for about 25 years now.
Oh, yeah.
And so joining his lab, it was kind of a clear decision that I would be working on saltmarsh sparrows to some degree. Most of my research focuses on saltmarsh sparrows, but also the larger saltmarsh breeding bird community. I knew I wanted to study birds, but saltmarsh sparrows are kind of a great poster child for the decline of salt marshes and the threats to salt marshes, and they really represent this, you know, tricky ecosystem in which birds have to try to navigate to live their lives.
I think tricky is a good word. Let's, if we could start with the photos, that would be great. Ah, yes. So I guess this is a range map of the Saltmarsh sparrow.
Sure.
To be honest with you, it looks a little thick, though.
I would agree, yeah. I mean, on this image here, you can see, I assume these are indications of the breeding range, the year-round range, right, and the wintering range in orange, green, and blue, respectively. And I would say generally, all along this region where the color is highlighting, saltmarsh sparrows are really only going to be found in a very, very thin strip right up against the coast. So I would probably say about 2% of what this is showing is actually where you find saltmarsh sparrows.
It is very, very narrow.
Yes.
In fact, when I go on to the website, the Cornell website, and looked at the map, you actually have to expand it several times to get to see the little line.
Right.
And really, that's all it is just a pencil line thickness.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, saltmarsh sparrows, they live their whole life in the salt marsh, from breeding to migration to overwintering.
Right.
And salt marshes are only found at that intersection where salt water and tides are infiltrating land, but they're not. The water is not sitting there permanently, so it's only within the tidal range, essentially.
Right,
so it's very, very narrow strips of land all along the coast.
And I mentioned this before, but several years ago I was doing a bird survey, and I was out in the marsh, and I did see a Saltmarsh sparrow ever so briefly. And he was on a little stick, a perch of some sort, and just about the time I took in the major parts of identification of his head and stuff, he disappeared into the grass, and the marsh grass, and I never saw him again. Very, very hard to see, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. That's kind of a standard Saltmarsh sparrow viewing experience. They generally are hanging down low in the marsh grasses. They're foraging kind of low. They're hiding under the grass to try to be shielded a little bit from the sun, which can be very intense in the salt marsh. They're also not vocalizing very regularly, so salt marsh sparrows don't hold territories, and so therefore a lot of vocalizations when it comes to singing, at least for songbirds, a lot of what they're doing, they're attracting mates, but they're also defending territories and advertising territories. And because saltmarsh sparrows don't hold territories, they're really only singing during short periods of time in the summer where they're trying to attract females that might be receptive to breeding at that time.
Wow.
So generally they're hanging out low down.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I was a little disappointed when he disappeared. Can we go to the next photo, please? Oh, what is this now?
Sure, yeah. So this is a great representation of kind of two of the main threats to salt marshes. So generally, I would say kind of in previous millennia, salt marsh extents have ebbed and flowed over time, and that is generally in line with the sea level at that given time. And so as sea levels rise, marshes can kind of migrate inland generally, and as sea levels fall, the salt marsh may reclaim some portions of that area where there's no longer water sitting. And in our current past couple hundred years, we've seen sea levels starting to rise fairly rapidly, mostly due to increases in greenhouse gas emissions. And so because of that, the sea levels are rising too fast generally for salt marshes to migrate at the pace at which the water's coming in. And then coupled with that is this threat of urbanization that's occurring along the landward edge of marshes.
I was just going to mention to you, in this, the bottom picture, coastal squeeze, the seawall could easily be homes and businesses that may not necessarily block the water, but certainly block the habitat.
Absolutely, yeah. I would say the seawall here, you can kind of just think of that as any impervious surface. So any surface where the salt marsh is unlikely to be able to transition or migrate into. And because of that, we have what folks call the coastal squeeze, where on the landward edge of the marsh, there's no capacity for the marsh to move inland, and on the seaward edge, the water is rising too fast for the marsh to deal with it, basically. So we have stressors on either side, which are kind of squeezing the extent of the marsh.
Hence the squeeze. Now, I would say that if you had an area of land area that could hold the marsh migration, there's probably people living there.
Yeah, I would say a lot of the time that's true. Coastlines are probably one of the most populated areas, especially in the U.S., but worldwide, a lot of people live near the coast, for a variety of reasons. But due to that, there aren't a lot of areas where marsh migration can naturally occur without there probably being some impacts on people living in that area.
Somebody's going to get upset.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I would say on the flip side, there are areas where coastal storm surge has really become a problem, and people may not want to live right up against the shore with, storm surges being so powerful, especially in recent years, and the prevalence of hurricanes. I experienced I guess it wasn't really a hurricane anymore, but a tropical storm when I first moved here in Connecticut. And I thought that's wild that we have tropical storms in Connecticut. But, because of that, there may be areas where people actually don't want to be living right near the coast anymore. And they may have to migrate inland, and that opens some capacity for management. As
a case in point, recently, this last storm, we're filming this We're filming this in October of 2025, and recently there's been footage of North Carolina shoreline homes being just demolished by the waves and stuff, and so it's going to be a challenge, I think. People aren't, and they're not going to get insurance either.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next picture, and then we'll get ready for break. Now, what is going on here?
So this is obviously me and one of my research technicians, Jenny. This was from this previous summer at Hammonasset Beach State Park, which is just down the road from here.
Yeah.
And this is one of our long-term research sites. So I've been working on Saltmarsh sparrow research for about 5 years now, but as I mentioned, my advisor's been working for about 25 years in the state.
Wow, yeah.
And so we have quite a bit of data from this site. And what we're doing here is, there's quite a bit going on, but we'll focus on what we're holding, which you can't see, but there's a bird in our hands. There's a Saltmarsh sparrow there.
Yep.
And we are affixing a radio tag onto the bird. And so the purpose of these radio tags is to basically track the movement of birds within the marsh. And so we've been really interested in understanding what portions of the marsh Saltmarsh sparrows are using, how that may vary across sites based on the size of the marsh, based on what management has occurred at the marsh, and just to kind of understand how interventions that we might be doing, property managers might be doing on the marsh, how that might impact the way in which Saltmarsh sparrows are using the marsh for breeding, for foraging, for other daily activities.
Yeah, yeah.
And these tags can get us that information on where the birds are hanging out.
Now, is Jenny on her way to be a researcher like yourself? Or is this like OJT for her?
So I hope that she continues along this track. She's done quite a bit of work on birds in the past, and she had this position that she worked with me this past summer is very similar to kind of the trajectory I had, where after my undergraduate degree I worked for other researchers, and then I went on to graduate school myself.
Okay.
And so I know Jenny's interested in kind of pursuing a career with birds.
You got a lot of equipment there out in the marsh.
Yeah, we need to haul in quite a bit every day. A lot of the other equipment on the ground is for bird banding, and so generally we're banding all the birds that we're capturing. So we're setting up nets in the marsh to capture birds,
Right,
which is a pretty standard procedure. And the bird banding that occurs is so we can track the populations.
Okay, so we're going to take a little break here. We're calling this the bird bath break. And it's about a minute or so long, and we'll be back in a second. Okay, welcome back. That was the bird bath video. A couple of sparrows, a Carolina wren, and a an immature robin taking a water bath. And we're going to continue on with our conversation with Franco Gigliotti, a grad student at UConn. And welcome back.
Thanks, Jim.
All right. So we're going to go to the next picture as we just talk about your work out in the field. There we go. Now, what exactly are we looking at here?
Sure, yeah, so it's a little hard to see, but in the center of the image here, this is an area where sediment has been added to the marsh. And so, as we mentioned earlier, salt marshes are dealing with these dual threats of urbanization and sea level rise. And because of that, salt marshes are disappearing in place. And ideally, we would have opportunities for salt marshes to move inland, but where that's not feasible, we can kind of buy time by building the elevation of existing marsh where it currently is. And so to do that, people have been doing this sort of management or restoration activity for quite some time down in the southeast. It's becoming more prevalent in the northeast now. We refer to it as sediment placement or sediment addition. And we're basically adding sediment to build up the elevation of the marsh.
Yeah. Now, is this what they call a mist net?
Yes, so this is what we use to capture birds. And so at this site here, this is Great Meadows Marsh. That previous photo was an area where sediment had been added at the marsh. And so we've been capturing birds and monitoring their use of the marsh after that sediment has been added. And so yeah, in this photo, it's Jenny that we saw earlier and one of my other field technicians, Kara, and both of them are pulling birds out of the net to ban them and put VHF tags on them so we can track their movements.
So in looking at the picture that we opened with, the beak looks pretty sharp. Do they get bit on occasion? Because it looks like they could put quite a big bite on them.
They certainly will try to bite you as you pull them out of nets. We're slightly harassing them. This is a standard procedure that's used throughout the world basically to capture birds, and it really just only gives them minor inconvenience, but they don't love being handled by humans, so they will try to bite. Saltmarsh sparrows, their bills, they're sharp, but their bite strength is not very strong. If you compare it to something like a northern cardinal, which is a seed eater, and they're using their bill to kind of crack seeds sometimes, that strength can be quite painful on your finger for sure.
So they're just strong enough to crush a crustacean of some sort?
Yeah, a crustacean with a not very strong shell or an insect that is very easy to bite.
Yeah. So here we are with the mist nets again, and I'm just amazed that these people aren't getting swallowed up in the mud and stuff.
Yeah, you can see in the photo there, Jenny's got some fairly high boots on. We're always wearing boots when we're out in the marsh. In kind of healthier marshes where there's not large expanses of mudflat, generally the marsh soil is fairly sturdy. It's spongy, and that allows it to absorb wave energy. So salt marshes are really good at reducing storm surge. But generally, we're not getting too wet in the marsh. There's a lot of ditches in the marsh that have been dug back in the early 1900s that were kind of for mosquito control. And those areas, you got to keep an eye out. If you step in one of those, you'll be going up to your waist.
Now, how are the bugs out there? Are the bugs bad?
They can be pretty rough.
I bet, yeah.
As we opened with, salt marshes are very productive ecosystems, so they're producing a lot of insects that the birds forage on, but it also means that those insects are foraging on us, basically.
Now, what is going on in this picture?
So this is another sediment addition site, so similar to what we showed before at Great Meadows Marsh, that photo. This is actually at Rocky Neck State Park, so just up the coast a little bit from here. And this is an area where quite a bit of sediment was added to the marsh. And when that happens,
area on the right?
Yeah, so actually on the right and on the left. There's just some standing water from the tide on the left there, but a lot of sediment was added here. This was a site that was pretty heavily degraded, and the purpose of that, was to build up the elevation, and because we added so much sediment, there was planting that occurred simultaneously. So if you add just a little bit of sediment, the plants can grow through it.
Yep.
If you think of adding a little bit of topsoil onto a garden or something, it's not going to smother the plants. But if you add a foot or two of sediment, the plants can't grow through that. So this was coupled with some planting of some native marsh plants. And this is about a month or two after the sediment.
My concern with adding a lot of sediment would be that the Phragmites would come back in.
Sure.
And just neutralize your whole attempt there.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a concern. These projects are the elevation target that's being shot for these sorts of projects, there's a very small window of error. So we need to build enough elevation so the marsh stays dry enough and it produces these higher elevation plants that birds like the Saltmarsh sparrow use, but not so high that it's not tidally influenced ever. And if that occurs, that's when we start to see Phragmites. So the salt water will help keep the Phragmites back.
The wretched scorn that it is. Next one, please. Now this is a very fascinating picture for me. And you have the little sparrow with a backpack of solar panels on it. Wow.
Yeah, so this is a Saltmarsh sparrow that we've put a VHF transmitter on. So the photo that you saw of Jenny and I putting a tag on that bird earlier, same sort of thing. This solar panel allows us to track, or allows us to be obtaining data from this bird basically for the lifespan of the bird. So it doesn't have a battery, so the tag never dies. And as long as the sparrows are hanging out within an area where we can get data on them as they're moving around, we'll be getting continuous data basically.
Now, is this connected to the MODIS system?
So it's not, but it's a very similar style. So if you're familiar with the MODIS system, and if viewers maybe aren't so familiar, it's basically an array of towers that are set up, and you can think of them kind of like cell towers. And as birds are moving through that have tags on them, the tags are pinging, and the towers are picking up that information. And the MODIS network primarily is focused on understanding how birds are migrating. And what we're doing here is very similar, but we have set up a bunch of basically small antennas all throughout the marsh. And it allows us to capture real-time data of birds as they move on their breeding grounds at very specific sites.
So I was of course concerned that this would be too heavy for the bird. So I went to Cornell University, all about birds, and the Saltmarsh sparrow weighs between 0.6 and 0.8 ounces, and that's about the weight of 4 Hershey Kisses, and yet you put this miraculous little tag thing on it. That's just incredible. Yeah,
so these tags are incredibly lightweight. We capture our birds and measure them in grams, and generally we're catching birds that are around 20 grams in weight. These tags are about 0.4 grams. So we're right at about the recommended weight for a tag, where we can put tags on Saltmarsh sparrows, but the technology is just getting better and better.
Franco, that is just amazing. Where do you get a tag like that?
So these are produced by Cellular Tracking Technologies, which is a company based out of New Jersey. There are other companies that produce these sorts of tags. Low Tech is another provider. And they're highly specialized equipment, but as I mentioned, the technology is getting better. We can get to smaller and smaller birds. So some people are even tagging insects now and looking at their movements. It's really incredible.
All right, so here we have, again, these guys are out in the marsh. They're not sinking, which is amazing to me.
Yeah, so this is the Great Meadows Marsh restoration in action here. This was about 4 years ago now at this point. They're using low pressure excavators with mats that they've placed out to really reduce the impact on the marsh. Working in a salt marsh and doing this sort of construction work is very different than working at a normal construction site, because all of it boils down to creating features in the marsh, highly elevated areas with sediment, while also minimizing any sort of impact to the marsh. So you really need to be careful.
Okay, so again, that's just amazing. And this is sediment from dredged up harbors or something?
So this sediment actually came from on-site. This was kind of a unique project. I would say the norm is that sediment addition projects are often using material dredged from harbors.
Yeah.
People refer to it as beneficially reusing sediment, and it's a great opportunity to use sediment that's already being dredged and apply it to salt marshes, so it's kind of a win-win. This actually used sediment on site because there were areas that were too high in elevation and had phragmites, and part of the restoration project, the goal was to bring some of that elevation down to allow for more tidal influence and to promote generation of native plants. So that sediment was used to construct.
Let's go to the next one. That's good that they know that they're doing that. Oh, and so I guess we have plantings here.
So this is actually what you're seeing here. Anything that is sticking through the sediment is all vegetation that grew through. So I took this photo about 2 months ago. This is up in Wells, Maine. This is the first sediment addition project that occurred in the state of Maine. And they used dredged sediment from the harbor. The sediment was very sandy, so as you can see here, it's very lightly colored. There are pros and cons to using different types of sediment, but one of the biggest drivers of what you're using is just what's available. And so the sediment was clean and we were able to use it. This project, they just recently added the sediment. So in a couple of years, we'll see what happens, but have high hopes that this will help regenerate some habitat that saltmarsh sparrows could use.
Okay. Let's go to the next one, please. And this is...
So this is part of our tracking setup. And so as I mentioned, we're using basically small receivers, many small receivers in the marsh to allow us to track birds in real time. And this is one of those receivers. So this is at, again, at Hammonasset Beach State Park. And we have about 40 of these scattered all throughout the marsh. And that allows us to really get fine scale information about where saltmarsh sparrows are spending
40,
time.
That's a lot.
Yeah, a lot of work to set those up.
I bet, yeah. All right, next one, please. Oh, solar panel.
Yeah, so this is what we call the base station of the tracking array. And so what we last saw was one of the small receivers. This station picks up information from all of those receivers across the marsh. And so this allows us to basically just congregate all those data, and then it's actually connected to the cell network. So it's really convenient for me. It means I don't have to go out to the marsh and download data. I can upload it to the cell network and download it onto my laptop while I'm sitting in the office sipping my coffee. So it's pretty great.
That's amazing. So I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
From a saltmarsh sparrow's nest, how far does he range, or how far does she range in getting food for the babies?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would say our data suggests from some of this movement data that their home ranges are 1 to 2 hectares. They're generally foraging 100 meters, 200 meters maybe from the nest at most. But they're staying pretty close to the nest. Females will come off the nest for 20 minutes at a time is kind of the maximum. They need to stay on the eggs to either keep them warm when it's cold or to keep them cool when it's warm, actually, and have an appropriate temperature for the eggs to develop and the nestlings to hatch out. And especially when the nestlings are hatched out, the female needs to be visiting the nest much more frequently because she's the only one doing the parental care.
Right. I remember that from the
provide
first
any.
show, the male does virtually nothing.
Pretty
and
much.
The female does everything.
Exactly.
Which is a unique system, I would think.
Yeah, it's not incredibly unique. I would say to the degree that saltmarsh sparrows kind of capitalize on it is somewhat unique, but a lot of birds have kind of one sex that does most of the parental care, and generally it's females, sometimes it's males, but for saltmarsh sparrows, because of how productive the salt marsh is, the females can basically afford to do all of the work essentially because they don't need to forage for as long to find insects because there's just so many insects in the salt marsh.
They're all over the place.
Yeah.
So what is the primary, I guess the primary threat to nesting success is the tides, the high tide.
Yeah, I would say generally that's the case, especially in New England. Further south, predators can be a problem as well.
Oh.
There's some data from previous researchers that has shown that predation can definitely be a driver of failure, but for salt marshes generally, salt marsh sparrows, we're generally thinking tides are the main cause of nest failure, and salt marsh sparrows need to basically fit their nesting cycle within the highest tides of the month. So right now, that's going to be at the new moons. It can vary. Sometimes it's the full moon, sometimes it's the new moon, but they basically need to fit this nesting cycle in between those two new moons in the summer. And if they're not able to do that, as the highest tide of the month comes in, it almost always wipes out all of the nests.
Wow. And that's what the hummock is for?
Yeah, so what you're referring to is that image that we showed earlier at Great Meadows Marsh where sediment was being added.
Yep.
So we refer to those kind of colloquially as hummocks. And the purpose of that was to build up higher elevation areas where salt marsh sparrows would nest, and then their nest would then be protected from the floodwaters, basically. Okay. And we have a little bit of evidence showing that that probably was successful. But there's a lot of other things going on in terms of doing a restoration where we may have positive impacts for salt marsh sparrows, but we also want to think about the other species in the marsh. So other birds may not be as positively impacted by that sort of management. So it's something that we're always wanting to continue to collect data on to really fully understand the outcome of any project that we do.
So what I like to ask my guests is what can the public do to help the process?
Sure. Yeah, I would say for salt marsh sparrows, one of the biggest drivers of their population decline, as we mentioned, is sea level rise and flooding associated with that. So sea level rise is driven primarily by climate change. So any way you can reduce your carbon emissions is something that I think the public can do. That's a positive outcome.
Right.
I would also say that there are a lot of groups that are doing this sort of work similar to what we've shown in some of the photos of doing restoration or management at the marsh level. And so engaging with those groups, whether it be through volunteerism or any sort of maybe donations or something, that's all something that I think can provide a positive outcome as well. So just staying informed and and if you care about salt marshes, doing whatever you can to try to support people that are doing work in the marsh.
So here we have a video depicting I guess a typical nesting cycle. And then from here it looks like a short amount of time that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. So the amount of time that they generally need to have a successful nesting cycle is about 24 to 26 days. And that's pretty much about what we get between those two highest tides. So on this video, you're seeing the full moon represented as the highest tide.
Right.
As I mentioned earlier, it varies over time. But we can also see that high tide in the middle of the cycle as well. That's associated with the new moon. So as the sea levels are rising, which you'll see by that shift there.
I did see that, yeah.
That's indicating that we're seeing basically a tightening on either side that shortens that window. And so the salt marsh sparrows are having less and less time to successfully raise and fledge chicks. And as that kind of middle of the month tide becomes also higher due to sea level rise, if that basically crosses the threshold where the nest floods, we'll essentially see no successful salt marsh sparrow nesting at that point, which is very
not a lot of good news there, Franco. All right, so I did a little exploring on the internet, of course, and I was looking under the salt marsh sparrow is the Latin name for a salt marsh sparrow is the Amospiza caudacuta. Did I say that right?
Yeah, Amospiza caudacuta, yeah.
Okay, so some of the others in this group under this genus is LeConte sparrow, Nelson sparrow, of course the seaside sparrow, and they all seem to have very small, limited ranges. Like they they might all be in some kind of trouble of some sort.
Yeah, I would say that's generally a good representation. Amospiza, the genus, has a good variety of sparrows. Most of them are grassland or salt marsh associated birds, and grasslands and salt marshes are habitats that are generally restricted in extent, especially now. Grasslands had been more prevalent historically, but because of that, and both of these habitats are declining pretty rapidly, so because of that, most of the species in that genus are under some sort of threat. But that's kind of par for the course for the majority of biodiversity, well, I would say.
I guess we can't thank you enough for doing what you're doing to learn more about this bird, and maybe give it a break, maybe give it a chance.
I hope so, yeah. I mean, the work that we're doing and that I'm doing with many collaborators across a lot of universities, state agencies, governmental agencies, we're all sharing the same goal of trying to protect salt marshes, and then as an outcome of that, really trying to protect the habitats that these birds rely on and hopefully give them a chance right. against all odds to persist.
Now, I have a question as a grad student that you are. Is it expected that you write papers, and you're doing research, but do you have to publish papers every so often, or you just wait till the research is done and then you publish?
I would say generally we're waiting until the research is done before we're publishing anything, but as I'm working throughout my time as a grad student at UConn, I've been publishing some papers associated with this work, and all of that kind of ends up being a dissertation, which is kind of standard for attaining a PhD. So right. Yeah, so some of this work is published, some of it will soon be published, I think. So now
I know you're out in the field. Do you have to go to class?
I'm not taking classes now.
You ever show up in the classroom?
Because I've been at UConn for quite some time now, so most of what I do is research centric. Okay. But when I started at UConn, yeah, I was definitely taking classes, learning skills that I can apply in my research and then in my writing as well. That's based on all the research that I'm doing.
All right. So that's our interview with Franco Gigliotti, research specialist on the Saltmarsh sparrow. And thankfully, you're doing the work that you do. And, I know a lot of people will not see the Saltmarsh sparrow, but I'm very grateful that you do. That you do the research and spend time out in the bugs and the research in the mud and all that stuff. So thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And salt marshes are pretty easy to access in Connecticut, so I think there are ample opportunities actually for people to see salt marsh sparrows if they want to.
Yeah.
So.
I actually have a marsh in probably about 200 yards from my house. So.
Oh wow. So you're well poised to see.
Yes, I am actually. All right, so that's our show for today. Thank you very much, and a special thanks for grad student Franco Gigliotti. He's doing wonderful, vital work, and we should all thank him. Thank you, Franco.
Thanks, Jim. Really appreciate it.